I'm honored to host today's policy briefing, which includes some of America's leading civil rights, justice, and education advocates. And I'd like to thank everyone here for coming. As Kamara indicated, I serve on the House Education and Workforce Committee and the House Judiciary Committee, and until recently also served on the House Budget Committee. And those have an interesting situation because they're very much intertwined when you talk about crime policy. You talk about the budget, you're making expenditures, and you choose between education and workforce or judiciary. Now, I've been in Congress for 18 years and in state legislature before that, and I've noticed that you really have a choice with crime policy. You can reduce crime or you can play politics. We're good at both. You can make the investments in young people to get them on the right track and keep them on the right track so they don't get in trouble at all, or you can codify simple-minded slogans and sound bites, tough on crime, lock them up, throw away the key, and spend a lot of money to do nothing to reduce crime. These slogans and sound bites that we've been codifying over the past couple of decades have produced a situation that we see right here. These little green bars are the incarceration rate in most of the countries that you can name. Most 50 to 200 per 100,000. South Africa and Russia are somewhat outliers. But number one in the world, the United States, is 700 and some per 100,000. Adding insult to injury, the African American average, 2,200. And 10 states lock up almost 4,000 African Americans for every 100,000 population. And these three bars are particularly egregious because the Pew Research Center has calculated that any incarceration rate over 500 per 100,000 is actually counterproductive. That is, you're wasting so much money and injecting so much social pathology into the community, then you're bringing out that, in fact, it is actually counterproductive to have an incarceration rate more than 500 per 100,000. Here we are 700 and some on average, up to 4,000 per 100,000 in 10 states. California is an example of how bad things can get. Just today, the Supreme Court confirmed a decision that their incarceration rate is so high that they have to start letting tens of thousands of people out of prison. Now, we know how to lower incarceration costs and numbers and make the public more safe, and that is by providing a continuum of services to get young people on the right track and keep them on the right track. We know that those comprehensive plans work. Every time you put a little comprehensive plan together, you notice not only the crime rate dropping, but also significant savings in money. In Pennsylvania, they had a program where they funded $60 million. They funded about 100 different programs around the state. They looked up a couple of years later, they'd saved $300 million. Spent 60, saved 300. And we know the programs work, not only save money. In Boston, they had a comprehensive plan to deal with the fact that they're having about one juvenile murder per month, about 12 or 13 a year. They put a plan together, the community came together, and for 3 years they didn't have a single juvenile murder. In Richmond, Virginia, $2.5 million comprehensive plan in one neighborhood where they had 19 murders one year. In a couple of years, they'd gotten down to 2. And if you just look at the number of people that didn't have to show up at the Medical College of Virginia trial unit, you saved more than $2.5 million just in hospital costs, hospital and medical costs, to say nothing about the cost of chasing down the culprits, locking them up, and spending all the money in law enforcement and incarceration. So we know that these plans work. The Youth Promise Act, as mentioned, is a program first requires the community to come together, get everybody around the table that has anything to do with young people getting in trouble, law enforcement obviously, the school system, the mental health community, faith-based community, after-school programs like the Boys and Girls Clubs, court services, everybody that has anything to do with children getting in trouble, get them around the table and come up with an evidence-based plan to reduce crime. And I say evidence-based, people say, wait, as opposed to what? As opposed to the slogans and sound bites that politicians would put together if you didn't put evidence-based in there. Come up with a plan, and the Youth Promise Act on a priority basis would fund as many plans as the budget would allow. We know that those plans work. We know that we'll save more money than we spend. We've had good support in the House. We've had problems in the Senate. But we're going to try again this year, focusing on the No Child Left Behind reauthorization. When you talk about an area to be served, we call it a school zone. We know that some school zones are spending, if you look at the people, the social pathology in that school zone, there are many school zones where you've got 10, 20, 30, as much as $50 million a year in one high school zone being spent on incarceration, teen pregnancy-related Medicaid and social services and a lot of other social pathology that would be cured with comprehensive plans, getting young people on the right track and keeping them on the right track. We know that if you reduce crime, you'll also reduce dropouts, you'll also reduce teen pregnancy and a lot of other problems that occur. And so we're very hopeful that we can get it as part of the No Child Left Behind reauthorization if we ever get there. We don't know whether that's going to happen or not, particularly in light of the complications with education funding we're having so far. But in any event, we want to thank you for coming, and we have a great panel. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panelists. First will be Hillary Shelton. He is the Director and Senior Vice President for Advocacy for the NAACP Washington Bureau. He will broadly discuss the findings of the NAACP's recent report, Misplaced Priorities, Over-Incarcerate, Under-Educate. And I think the title gives you an idea of what he's going to say. Next, we'll have Kamara Jones come back to us. She will present a map of Philadelphia from the Misplaced Priorities report that shows the concentration of pockets of incarceration. She's filling in for Eric Cadora, who was supposed to be here, but because of a family emergency, could not make it, so Kamara's going to say what he would have said. The Honorable Stephen Tesk is next. He is the juvenile court judge in Clayton County, Georgia, and he will discuss community-driven process he spearheaded in Clayton County to reform the local juvenile justice system. Michael Shields will be next. He is the director of the Office of School Safety and Security for the Chicago Public Schools. He will discuss the district's efforts to reduce violence that occurs within and beyond school grounds, and they have a targeting process where they kind of use demographics to figure out who's most at risk. When you look at the risk factors, we know that if you have a high-risk group, you could invest almost as much money as you want, and still have, if you can reduce crime, you'll be saving more money than you spend. In fact, if you look at this little chart right here, when they talk about the counterproductive incarceration, if you look at these 10 states, and counterproductive is everything over 500, the cost of keeping those other 3,500 per 100,000 in jail, you took that money and aimed that money at 1/3 of the children who are at risk, you could spend $10,000 per child per year in what you're spending just on counterproductive incarceration. And obviously, as you save some money because they wouldn't be getting in trouble, you'd have to spend it again, and you could never spend the amount of money that you're wasting in counterproductive incarceration. So he's going to talk about what the Chicago school system is doing. And finally, we'll end the panel with Matt Krieger, who is the Assistant Counselor for Education and Practice at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He will discuss LDF's efforts through the Dignity in Schools campaign to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline by pushing for alternative discipline methods to be used in public schools. He'll also offer public policy recommendations for the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, most recently called No Child Left Behind. So Hillary, we'll start with you, and thank you all of our panelists. To give our panelists a big hand.